Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Good.
Cool. We lit up?
We are live.
We are live.
Perfect. Let's do this.
Do it.
Let's do it.
All right. We are excited about this one because we have our first guest is here today, Catherine Conkey. Now, Catherine, by way of introduction, you met Billy
I did.
not even an hour or
No.
half an hour ago.
10 minutes ago.
Catherine and I, Billy, just by introduction for you and for the listeners, her husband, Gary, and I have worked together since, I think, 1989, maybe 1990. How long have you two been together?
We've been together 28 years.
So as long,
yeah.
almost pretty much as long as I've known Gary,
Right on.
you two have known each other. So that's how far back Catherine and Gary and I go back is 28 years. And Gary is operations manager here, and he and I, again, worked for a courier company before, and then Gary moved over when I started a different company, and that company then morphed into this company, and we've told those stories. And along the way, I got stuck with Gary, but I got Catherine.
Awesome. I
Yes.
can tell you Jerry's stories too from way back, but I won't.
You
Not
can.
the first time.
So tell us about the podcast. You've been listening to them in
Yeah.
anticipation of coming in. What do you think?
Yeah, I love it. My favorite thing about it is how authentic they are. I didn't know what to expect going into this at
Right.
all. I was concerned it was going to be maybe a little bit like an interview format. But what I loved about listening to it is how conversational, how interactive you are. I mean, it's just exactly like sitting and talking with Jerry, listening to Jerry talk. Except that I don't get to interject. So now I get to interject just like I would if we were sitting across the table talking.
It's not like
But-
you to interject.
No.
Yeah. Catherine and I have had some fantastic
Yeah.
conversations over the years. And I think the neat thing about my relationship with Catherine, and again, this has some business context, we should say right out front, in that Catherine has started at businesses and still has businesses, and Gary and Catherine have failed at businesses and have redone the business and started all over again. So she has a wealth of information on the things that take place when you are trying to start something from scratch on multiple levels. But then just on the other side, and again, part of this podcast is just the story of life and the game of life and the different things that come with it. And with life comes relationships. And I'm always preaching about the importance of relationship to Billy and to the people that listen and how they affect you even in business. And Catherine has been one of those relationships for me that I would say that when we started 28 years ago, we could not have been more diametrically opposed, I think, to each other, how we think probably politically specifically. And it's interesting how always friendly.
Absolutely.
We would every now and then get a little heated, but always friendly. And over the years, it's really changed. I think we probably think more alike. I think we've both kind of come together as tends to happen as you get older. And we've kind of met in the middle. And now we kind of exchange views more than argue about views. And it's been one of those fantastic relationships that you get to have that can only take place over time. Right? You can't do this over a year, even 2 years. We're talking about multiples of decades. And I say to my kids all the time, I have my buddy Mike, and Mike worked with me at McDonald's when I was 16 years old. And Catherine, of course, knows Mike. And I don't know if you've met Mike yet, Billy.
I don't think so.
No, he works all the time. But Mike and I go back to when I was 16 years old. And think about how many people do you have that are close friends that you have your whole life, essentially. And it's very rare. It's very rare to have one, they say. Like Mikey goes back to 16 years old. I have friends that I went to school with that you can talk to and that sort of thing. But I mean true friends. And Catherine and Gary and I have now been friends going on 3 decades. And I just don't think that those things happen. And it's one of those benefits in life that you're fortunate enough to run across people like that, particularly when we have differences of opinions. So that's kind of the background from my perspective with Gary and Catherine. So when we started this podcast and we finally got comfortable doing it and we started getting in the 20s, I was like, all right, we need guests. So who's our first guest going to be that can bring a little bit of everything? And boom, that's Catherine.
Yeah, I'm really honored.
There you go.
Hey, I just gotta add on to what you said. I think that part of the reason why our relationship has grown and endured and our friendship is so rich is that there is a mutual respect. So
Sure.
we can differ, and that doesn't really matter. I mean, that's part of life. You're talking about life.
Right.
But there's respect. You always respectfully listen to me.
Right.
And hopefully you feel like I respectfully listen to you and learn a lot from you.
And in today's world where everything is so hyper partisan,
Yeah.
right? It seems like even things that aren't political have become partisan. Being able to have conversations. Let's say, Billy, if you weren't into making money or capitalism or business in general, and you were completely against that, how much richer would the conversation between us be if we could have those conversations amicably and respectfully?
Definitely super valuable
Right?
because it opens you up to opinions, but I think you need a certain mindset and the certain types of people to be open to those opinions.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And so that would be a characterization of our relationship. And I think that's why it's been as rich as it has been.
Very
and
much.
it's amazing that this much time has gone by. 30 years already.
Yeah.
I started out by asking you about our podcast. So one of the things that I hear about the podcast, particularly from my kids, is that I'm so forceful. Right. And this is what I hear. I have friends all over the country, and that, as I've gotten friends to listen to me, I get the same thing, it can sound harsh. So I'm trying to not be harsh. I'm trying to be honest. And I come from a place that is so far away from where I am. And you've kind of seen that over the years.
Definitely.
And so you have that inside baseball knowledge on the podcast. But one of the words you said, I think you said, it comes through as authentic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really authentic.
Good.
And that you have a vulnerability.
That's not a word I get associated with me
but
very
I
often.
experienced
So
that when
take
I
that
listen to your podcast. You're willing to say, is somebody waving?
Yeah,
You're
Brookie.
willing to be really introspective, look at yourself, and be really raw and really honest. And right in front of, the world and everybody, not just across the table from me when we're having a good conversation.
Right.
So when I said authentic, I'm talking about all of that. I mean, listening to your podcasts are just exactly like listening to you and discussing things with you in real life.
Right.
I mean, you are open and honest, and I know that you're not going to use the word for yourself vulnerable because I know you really well, but there is a vulnerability to that. Not everybody does that.
Well, and I think the lesson there, and there's a big business lesson to be gleaned from that, and that is that I preach introspection and self-awareness. And as you know, I think that there is nobody, I have a hard time ever meeting anybody if I could brag about myself that's half as self-aware or half as introspective as I am. My feelings can't be hurt. And so I want to, if I'm not doing something wrong, or if I'm not doing something right, or I have to correct something that I've done, or I've made a mistake and it needs to be fixed, that to me is living. When you're younger, when I was 25 years old, I was incorrigible. Right. I think the way that you describe me today, and this is an important lesson for everybody, when I was 25, I was an animal. And now in the intervening 24 years, so say 25 years, life experiences that I've learned and I've taken and that I've put them to work, so much so now that where I am now, I'm able to correct and listen and learn and be open to being wrong. I mean, when I was 25 years old, you couldn't tell me shit, right? I knew everything, right? Because I was a kid from the streets that made a couple of dollars and had crawled my way halfway up. And you take that and you go, well, I know everything. And there's one thing I've learned, as I've said before, you don't know shit till you're 40. Right. They used to tell me that all the time. I would be managing 150 people when I was 30 years old. And I always had to listen. Okay, Jerry, but, my CEO group would tell me, you don't know shit. I go, what do you mean? You don't know shit till you're 40. God, I used to just rail against that. There's one truth that I know in this universe to be 100% true. And that's that you don't know shit until you're 40. And so for me, that maturity, I'm happy to hear you say that, because that's the maturity that I try to live or to have attained. And to hear that now, vulnerability is kind of a hard word for me to,
I knew it would be.
I think honest is probably a better word I would use, but I see your point. That's about as high a compliment as I can get, because that's what I'm trying. And that's what this podcast is all about, is just tell them the fucking truth. If that hurts somebody's feelings, I'm sorry. That's too bad. If you don't agree, that's great. I'm happy. Let's have that conversation, and I'll have that spirited debate with you. But let's tell it like it is without any bullshit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So you have some interesting experiences in business. And since this is a primary business podcast, let's talk about some of those and some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. So let me just give a 5-second overview on the one specifically that I'm talking about.
Okay.
There's two. There's the, you bought the big loom, the big,
yeah.
right? And then you did the photo business.
Yes.
And the photo business probably was more along the lines of what somebody listening to this would probably listen to, or if Billy was going to go out and start a business. Tell me about that. Let's talk about that a little bit and some of the pitfalls and some of the items that you ran into. If somebody were starting a business, if Billy was to go out, he's 25 years old and go start a business, what would Catherine tell him based on her experience with bridal photography or photography in general?
Oh yeah. I listened to the podcast where you talked about how you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're just sharing, you're open to opportunities that come to you, even if it's like not a paid gig.
Yeah.
But it's something you've never done. It's something that excites you. It's something that you could learn from. And that's how I started when I got into photography too. I'd always wanted to do it. I always told everybody that's what I want to do. And I finally took a big plunge. I bought all the really expensive equipment first before I really even knew it. So I was forced into it. I bought it. I had to learn it. And then I just looked for every opportunity I could get to shoot and learn more and more.
Now,
and
how
more.
long ago was that you started that?
That was almost 12 years ago.
12 years
Yeah,
ago.
it'll be-
So we won't give away your age, but suffice it to say it was over 30,
Yeah.
right?
It was over 30.
The point being that you don't have to be young,
No.
right? You could start this at any time.
Yeah.
As long as it's something that you want to do and you feel passionate about. But it wasn't without its pitfalls.
No, I made giant mistakes, which I don't know if I should
Sure.
tell you all of them
If
in
you don't
one
mind
sitting.
yeah, we don't have all night, Catherine. But I think that's the point. Share with us.
Yeah, I'll start with saying that I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I jumped in. I'm glad I bought all the equipment. It forced me to learn it, and it forced me to, I was committed.
Yes.
So I don't think that was a bad decision. And I bought the best, absolutely the best that I could afford. So that was a really, really good decision.
Is it, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you. Is it fair
Sure.
to say that you bought the best that you couldn't afford?
Yes, that's fair to say.
That's probably a better
I
way of
bought the
putting
best that I couldn't afford.
that. Yes.
Yeah. And then I would say that mistakes started happening when I grew a little bit too quickly. I knew a lot of people in the wedding industry. I was very lucky. I'd officiated weddings for 12 years and I had established some really good relationships. So when I learned my equipment, when I learned my craft, when I had done enough free work, when I felt like I could do a really nice end product for brides and grooms that wanted the type of work that I did, and I took the plunge, I would say it grew a little bit more rapidly than I thought. And I ended up having to hire an employee to help. And then all of a sudden that sort of cut into money that I was making.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a fine balance between how much work to take on and how much work not to take on. And I was really fortunate because now photography industry, particularly wedding photography, is inundated. Everybody's a wedding photographer. I go to the bank. The person behind the cashier says, "Oh, what do you do?" And I say photography, and they say, "Oh, that's what I've always wanted to do. That's what my sister does. That's what my mother does. That's what my daughter does." Everybody you run into is either a photographer or wants to be a photographer. It seems
Right.
like sometimes. Billy knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So now I had a high class problem then with too much work because now it's hard. It's hard to get in, but I had the right in. So I would say that balancing my time when there are busy spots was a problem, spending too much money, hiring stuff out. Go ahead.
Let's go back to one of the things that I've preached from day one that you said right at the beginning. I want to make a point out of it, which is that you went and bought the stuff before you had work. You bought the product, you bought the cameras, you bought the stands, you bought the lights, you bought everything you needed, and you bought way over what you could afford so that you were all in.
I was all in.
And some of the Instagram posts that we've done and some of the conversations that Billy and I have had over the years or over the podcast is me saying, people think there's a school of thought out there in the business community, if you will, in the consultant world, all of these inspirational speakers. And one of the things that they generally tell you is that you should get 6 months worth of expenses before you start anything, and have this perfectly laid out plan before you start anything, and try to figure out every mistake that you might make and do all of your research and spend all of this time. And I'm the guy that says, climb up the fucking diving board
Interesting.
on the deep end and huck yourself in the water.
Yeah.
Because you can sit and plan and strategize and think about it and from a million ways to Sunday, couldn't you?
Absolutely.
And never do anything.
Never do anything.
Because you can always find a reason not to. You didn't do that. Now, what if you had? Do you think you would have? If you spent the time, because I know you, so I think I know the answer, but had you spent the time thinking about it and strategizing it and tried to come up with it and getting some sense of what it would cost and what the end result would be, would you have done it?
I don't think so. I think that's a really good question.
Right?
And I'm pretty confident of that answer because I'd been saying it for 11 years before I started doing it. This is what I've always wanted to do. This is what I want to do.
11 years before you did it.
Yeah, I photographed, started photographing weddings, but prior to that, I officiated weddings. So I've actually been to over 1,000 weddings.
Wow.
Performing wedding ceremonies. And I would follow the photographer around, watch what they were doing, and tell them, I want to do what you're doing. I want to do what you're doing. And I think that I would still be saying that had I not just taken the plunge. And certainly not now, because there is so much competition.
What was the trigger then after 11 years that you were like, all right, to hell with it, I'm going?
The digital cameras got really good. And I was able to learn it faster because of that. Film is harder.
Right.
Digital cameras, you can look, Billy knows, you can look right immediately and see if your f-stop is off and your aperture setting and your ISO and all of that stuff. So the learning curve was good.
How much is in focus and if it's too dark or if it's too bright.
Yeah. And then I bought Photoshop. And buying Photoshop is what did it for me, is that I could spend hours and hours and hours editing.
So it was
and it takes hours and hours.
Yeah.
And hours.
And I absolutely loved that. And that was what did it. I just thought, I want to spend all of my time doing this. This is what I want to do.
There was a point where there was a product, or somebody else might say a person, that gave you the confidence then to go do what you had been secretly thinking about doing, or maybe consciously or even subconsciously doing. And there was an inflection point where all of a sudden you're like, well, shit, look, there's digital. I think I can do this. I don't understand the physical part of camera and film, but digitally, that's something I can do. And that was then the impetus, if you will, or that was the reassurance you needed to go, I think I can do this. So there was that point, and then you jumped.
I did.
Good for you.
Thank you.
And went way in over your head.
I did.
Yes, perfect. That's the way to do it.
No regrets either. No regrets.
That's just it. Because even when you lose, you win. Am I right?
Absolutely.
That's what I preach every day. Even when you lose, you win.
And I won't say how old I am either, but even in your life, you have to look at where you are right now and absolutely all the little tiny small things that you have done that have led up to where you're at right now. It's like if you're living a life and make mistakes, those mistakes add up to what you're doing now. I mean, everything, your mistakes, the things that you've been good at, the little things you've tried.
It's so hard too, isn't it, to learn those? As I've gotten older, it's easier to learn the lessons, but it's so hard to learn. Life throws so many lessons at you, particularly when you go out and you start businesses, and you just want to go, it's Billy's fault. I didn't do that. It's Catherine's fault. Yeah. God damn it. Catherine's husband, Gary, screwed me on that one. Right? It's so easy in your head to go, this can't be my fault. When in reality, it's all your fault. Right?
Yeah.
And if it's not your fault, you have to make it your fault.
Yeah.
And you have to take responsibility for everything.
Yep.
True?
Absolutely.
Yeah, see, good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, can't even argue with that one little bit.
So you went out, you got in over your head, you got equipment, you had more work than you could do, and then what happened?
Then it kept growing a little bit because I was just photographing weddings, and soon those couples that I whose weddings I photographed started having babies, and they asked me, "Do you do baby photography?" And I had to create a studio space for that and learn all the skin editing and all the stuff that's different about Billy's nodding, all the stuff that's different about photographing a baby than it is photographing a wedding. And it took me about 3 years to feel like I was good enough to take on clients just because of the editing the skin part. And so that grew.
That is very interesting that then the business grew out of, I would never thought about that. People start having babies. So you said, okay, I can do that. Now, at some point you had more work than you can do. How'd you keep up? Because you guys used to do shit. You were doing weddings every weekend.
Yeah.
Seemed like 40 weekends a year.
Yeah.
If the sun even thought about shining, you were doing a wedding.
One weekend we did 5.
In one weekend.
One weekend, yeah.
Right.
How can you even be at all those things?
Friday night, 2 Saturdays,
two
and
of
2
them.
Sundays one weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So
Really tired.
then why aren't you super rich if you've done all those weddings? What's tell us the lesson. You did so many weddings, you must be flush with cash.
I think that's great though, because it's kind of that contrasting point though, is that you're always saying go and work and just work. And I think this is an interesting point of you can work really hard and
Well, the point she's about to make is also another lesson along those lines.
It's a business podcast.
Yes.
You're talking to somebody who's really who's creative, but not necessarily particularly good at business.
Yeah.
So I was good at marketing. I was good at getting clients. I loved what I do, and hopefully, people were coming back, but I wasn't very good at pricing myself. I wasn't very good at the amount of money that I was spending, like with other people helping me with editing and going through the images, the employee that I had, and then all the things that are involved with the state of Oregon with having an employee. Like you said, initially, I didn't raise my prices through any of that. So I was working. One year I worked and only took 3 days off, and I was getting up in the morning and working until I went to bed.
Right.
And then that year,
how much money?
And that year I lost money.
Yeah.
And my tax person that helps me with my taxes every year says, this is like a profit deal. You're supposed to make money.
Yes.
So you're talking to a great person who doesn't know as much about business as the creative process.
Right.
And I think that that's really, really common with creative people who are self-employed, doing something creative.
And I think it's common for most people, right? I think most business owners are people who got into business. Business didn't come to them. Meaning they didn't, I think they're people like me, or maybe they went to high school and they had a good idea, and they went to college and they kind of had a good idea, and then they get out and they're going to do that idea. Could be the kid started mowing lawns when he was in high school to take his girlfriend to the Friday night dance. Most business in my 30 years in business, that's where it comes from. And so people that get into it miss the cues, the very specific things that you should do first. We do them last. And I'll give you an example.
Yes.
In this business, there have been companies that have come and gone. We've been around for 20 years. And in my time, there's been companies that have gone that have outgrown me and then went bankrupt. And there were companies that have passed me the opposite direction, used to be bigger than us, and then went the other way and then went bankrupt. And when I would go to do these acquisitions, the company that would sell to me, all they would talk to me about was that top line. That top line being how much revenue they had. And I'd say, well, that's all fine. That's great. I'm glad you have all that revenue. How much money do you make? Because I never care about how much revenue is on the top line. Remember, I learned my lessons in 2000. When I started the company, we did $3 million the first year, almost $4 million the first year. We did $8 million the second year. We did $12 million the third year, and we did better than $14 million the fourth year. And at $14 million, I was making less than zero, nothing. And I was working 20-hour days making no money. And so we had to retool the company. You'll remember this, Catherine, and we took it back to $8 million. And at $8 million, I could get my hands around it, could kind of see what was going on. So I ditched customers that paid me $1, $2, $3 million a year. 2 customers in particular made up $5 million in revenue.
Wow.
I was like, fuck that, man. I'm not doing that work. I don't even know if I'm making money on it. All I know is I need to get this thing back where I could get my hands around it, because it's not about that top line. And so many companies and so many people think that we're just going to, all I got to do is sell it and then I'll figure out how to make money. No, you figure out how to make money first and then sell it. How much money do I need to get that back? You say, well, Jerry, it's an experience. And Catherine had a great experience. She did. But how early in that experience, Catherine, should you have recognized that and said, I'm working 5 weddings, I need to do 2 weddings at twice the price?
That's right.
Right? How
Yep.
long? I mean, the first couple of months, right?
No. Years.
Sorry to put you on the
No,
spot
that's
like
okay. That's okay.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you think? What was your psychology? And this is why I loved having you on, because I know you'll sit here and be honest with us and tell us the truth. But what's going through your head at that point? Are you fighting what should have otherwise been obvious to you? Or were you being stubborn, do you think? Between you and Gary, were you not looking at what was right in front of you? You know, what stopped you from seeing it? I'm not making any money. It seems like we double down when we're given something. You know, so many times we're given that, hey, you're not doing that right. Okay, I'm going to do that twice as wrong.
That's really a good question. In thinking about it, since you asked me right now, I would say that it was a negative belief that artists can't make money. That's sort of ingrained in our society. Artists can't make money.
Interesting.
I think I devalued what I was worth, that if I overpriced myself, see, I'm even using the term now, if I priced myself too much, I wouldn't get the work and it would stop and I wouldn't get to do what I love. But all that is like a loop of negative thinking that at the core of that is that artists can't make money. But a light bulb went on and I increased my wedding.
We had conversations about that. You guys were a good 18 months into it. I remember we were sitting at that Italian place and we had that conversation about do half as much work for twice as much. Yeah.
And there's also something that if you underprice yourself too much, that the other people won't perceive a value in what you're doing. So they can look at your work. I don't think it matters what business you're in. If it's too inexpensive, people will think they must not be very good. Or if you're selling a product, that product must not be very good. It's so inexpensive. So the venues that were referring clients to me for wedding photography were high-end venues. And I was definitely the least expensive venue or vendor, the least expensive wedding photographer. But I wonder how many people passed me up because of that. So I realized my target market is a higher end, and I'm probably losing people if I'm underpriced my photography.
Well, yeah,
they're going to think she's not very good.
Yeah, if you get the way I would think of it is that if I was rich and I was hiring some awesome photographer for my wedding and I wanted the best of the best, and I get a list of photographers and automatically there's 10,000, there's 5,000, there's 3,000, there's 1,000. I'm not even going to consider the 1,000 price because it's person. In comparison to the rest, there's obviously something that they're not up on the up and up about.
Right.
So I totally get that point.
And there's a psychology behind that. And I'll tell this story. I had somebody that was really close to me that was owed a ton of money by a person that was like the number 3 person at a Fortune 500. I don't want to say who it is because it'll give it away who it was. And they were owed a ton of money. And so they came to me and they were just in knots about all of this work, like $80,000, right, that they were owed. And this is a company that did maybe $400,000 or $500,000 a year. So roughly 20% of their money they were owed. And the person they did the work for was mega rich. And so they came to me all tied up in knots, and this had been going on for months. And I said to them, well, did you go ask her? I mean, I just asked the obvious question. Did you go ask her? No, it's, and it's just so much money and it's so important to us. And I said, I know, because it's so important to you, you don't value it the way that you should, which is through her eyes, through the person who's giving you the money. We all look at the money through our eyes rather than look at it through the eyes of the person we're getting it from. So I said to her, $80,000 is like $80 to you. I know it's hard to fathom, but you have to understand that. They make millions and millions of dollars a year. You go to her, and I said to them, here's what I think she's going to do. she's going to say, you're fucking retarded for not coming and talking to me for 3 months while your kids are starving, right? For a check I owe. I'm busy. I got shit to do, right? I'm sorry. I should pay you. Yes, but I don't think about it. And she'll write you a check. And God damn it, toot my own horn. That's exactly what happened. And he came back and he said, I can't, you were exactly right. I said, that's right. Because you're looking at money through your eyes, not through the eyes of the customer that's paying you. So to your point, you could have probably gotten double what you were charging easily, but to you it seemed like so much money. But that's you looking at money your way. And the lesson here, and this is an important lesson because this you will run into this anywhere and everywhere. People that are starting businesses, we devalue because we want that work, and so we devalue what we bring to the table in order to land the work, and we think that's a success. It's not. It's not. It's not. And there's not. And that's not the way to look at it. But it was easy, wasn't it? To do. It's really easy to do. Yeah. It's I've given that advice. I've told that story 500 times. Yeah. To 500 different people. Yeah.
It's really true.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you figured it out and you did what?
Raise my prices a
Raise
huge
your
amount.
Prices. And what happened?
I got really good work.
Yep.
Yeah. And I did.
Less of it?
A little less of it. Yeah.
Little,
less of it.
A lot?
Little, not a lot.
Nice. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So did you lose customers that you previously had by raising your prices?
I think that I lost, I think that I did. I relied on my high-end venues to refer to me, and I dropped even going after in any way marketing at all a lower end, not lower end, but a lower
price point.
A lower price point.
Right.
People who had less of a budget to spend. So I just dropped. I didn't spend any more money advertising like on AdWords or Google or anything having it all to do with a lower price. I just stopped it. So I did get a lot less of that sort of work.
Mm-hmm.
Which was okay.
Yeah. But by that point, I had done enough that I had friends referrals to from people who, I photographed their wedding, and other people were telling me about it.
Previous
I can hear the argument right now then that somebody's going to throw in my face, which is, well, Jerry, that first year and a half that she spent or 2 years that she spent was her learning. That was her, or longer. The first 3 years that she spent, that was her lesson period, and that's how she learned her lesson. I can hear that because that's my, you got to go through it to learn it. What would your advice be? What could have happened to you earlier to have recognized that sooner, do you think? If you could go back and do it all over again, knowing what you know now, but understanding that you had to learn those lessons, what is there, and I'm putting you on the spot, is there something that you might have done? Was there a trigger that you might have had earlier, or something that you can look back now and say, right then, that was the point that I should have realized that?
This goes back more to life than to business.
Okay.
But I think that I had to learn that lesson the hard way. And I think I needed to have that year where I only had 3 days off and, never saw my friends. And and at the end of the year, lost money. So I think that I needed to have that lesson hit hard like that. I mean, I don't know if anybody could have told me if I would have listened, because I was so stuck into nobody's going to pay more. Artists don't make any money.
Yes.
That mindset is so strong.
A preconceived notion based on just what pop culture had taught you, which is really not the place to learn anything.
And it isn't. It wasn't based on really any truth.
Right.
It was just based on a false belief system.
Yes.
But those are hard. Those false belief systems are hard to shatter, especially maybe the older you get, they become more difficult.
Right.
But not impossible.
Sure.
So you asked me what I would have done earlier or differently.
Or no, if there's a warning sign that you could have picked up on,
looking
that would
back
have made
now,
you change.
Yeah, if Billy went through the same thing, you would tell him, go through it. You need your year to teach you a lesson, but look for this. Was there a low point for me? Was when I had a gigantic negative balance and couldn't make payroll the next day.
Yeah.
Now that's a lesson that'll kick you right in the teeth, right? But I remember that like it was yesterday, and I remember praying for the sun to go down because that respite between 5 o'clock when the banks closed and 9 o'clock the next morning when they opened, I could breathe. And I had 6-figure payrolls due the next day with no money in the bank. So for me, that was the fuck this. I got to survive this. I got to make my way out of this. And when I do, I'm never coming back here.
Yeah.
Because this is brutal. Now, I didn't exactly follow that path, right? Because I always put it out there and risk, but never to that extent did I get dug in so much, and I learned the lessons from them. So for me, that was my. If I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't. I'd learned this lesson earlier, but it took me 3.5 years to figure out that I didn't know how to make money. So I'm with you on the 3.5 years, but I can point to that moment and say that was it for me. That said, nope, going forward, I ain't touching shit unless I'm making money doing it.
Yep.
Do you have that?
I think it was really when my tax helper said, this, I mean, she was making a joke, but it really wasn't a joke. And she said, this is supposed to be a profit deal.
Yeah.
And you're showing a loss.
Otherwise, it's a hobby.
Every year.
Right. And
I look back on all the Saturday nights I couldn't get together with my friends.
Yes.
For years, because I'm photographing a wedding, and all the times that I worked until I went to bed and then got up in the morning and worked. All I did was edit photos, look at photos, shoot photos. And I was having fun, and I was excited I had all this business, and I would write all my little numbers down. Oh, I made so much this month, but I really wasn't making anything.
Right.
The equipment, I mean, Billy knows, the equipment for the first few years to build up your gear bag is really costly. And it's kind of cool. You can write that all off on your taxes, but at some point, you have to make money.
And it's
you have
almost
to make a living.
It was almost easy from that perspective, right? You got the work, you got the equipment, you're having fun, you're doing what you wanted, you were sitting in front of editing, you were taking pictures, you were interacting with people, and it was almost easy. The hard part, as these guys have heard me say 1,000 times, it's easy to sell business. Yeah. It's hard to make money. Yeah. It's hard to sell something. Agree. It's hard to sell. I think we did a Instagram post.
We did.
I think we said it's easy to sell something. It's hard to sell something at a profit. And that's where the hard part comes in. So if it's easy, you're probably not doing something correctly. And in your case, you weren't priced high enough.
No.
Yes. Good. Interesting. Yes. So now what are you doing?
So now what I'm doing is the market is becoming harder. Not to be negative, but it just is.
It's more saturated.
It's more saturated. So a few years ago, every once in a while, I would tell my husband, there are so many photographers now that I really need to do something different. I need to sell things to photographers or provide a service for all of these new photographers, because it's hard to compete with them, but they're going to need things. So over the last 3 years or so, I've been trying to figure out what that thing is. I thought about creating products that the photographer could buy. I thought about teaching. I thought about all sorts of things. And in the meantime, I started doing digital art where it was just for fun. It says I'm doing fewer weddings. I had more time freed up for my creative process to work. I started doing digital art. And then I had a light bulb that I could sell digital backgrounds, digital photography backgrounds to photographers that didn't have a photography studio. So one benefit I have that's still getting me work is I have a photography studio. So I can photograph newborns. I have all the props. I have all the lighting. I'm established. I've done it for a long time. So I have a client base. But I actually have all of these things in a studio. A lot of the new photographers coming into the market are in their 20s. They're often women. They call them clickin' moms. So I sort of know who my competition is, and that's who I wanted to sell to. So I did research and found that people who created digital backdrops that have photography props for people who don't have a studio, that they can take their own photos and use that digital backdrop or background to place their photos in that give it a high-end professional look as if it were shot in a studio, was a market that was very good, and that people who are doing it are making money. And it fits in with, like I said, everything in my life that I've done. So I have all of these props. I have all of these ideas. I know how to work Photoshop really well. I can create this product. I know what a newborn photographer wants. I know what they need. And there's a market for it. So there's the market. I'm realizing in my industry, the market is to sell to all these new people coming into the market. So, I mean, I think you could translate that to any business. I mean, it's like that basic business thing. If there's a need, fill it.
Sure.
I mean, that's more important almost than anything is
Right.
if there's a need, fill it. So I got this idea, figured out a need, and I'm like completely jazzed about it. And all the work that I'm doing now, I'm not making any money at yet, but it's residual income. So I make this product. I can sell it while I'm sleeping to somebody in Sweden or in New York. I make it once and it's like this residual money that keeps coming in. So as more and more photographers are coming in, I mean, that's my business. So that's what I know. The more and more people are going to need this type of product, and people are doing fairly well.
And that is such an important lesson also. Answer number 1,200 that I give, I don't know, I've lost track. But when I'm asked about success and how do you get success or how do you get rich, one of the answers to, let's just say, making a lot of money is you have to have somebody else earning the money for you. Mm-hmm. So Billy and I have had this conversation, and Ryan, my trainer, and I have this conversation all the time. I go to Africa and hunt, and I make the same money when I'm hunting in Africa as if I'm here.
That is so awesome.
Right? And,
yes.
And that's how you really put an extra few dollars in your pocket and earn that money.
Well said,
is
Jerry.
that when you're asleep, somebody in Sweden is using the product that you've made or you've done. Or in my case, things are happening, gas is getting pumped, or buildings are being occupied, or transportation is taking place while I'm asleep. And so that's all value that I'm getting without me having to actually do that physical work. I did the work to get there, and then somebody else is paying me for it.
Right on.
And that is something to aspire to when you start out. So often we want to sell our own product, us. We want to sell what we have. We want to sell who we are. The reality is, figure out what you can give to somebody else to sell on your behalf, or figure out what you can sell to somebody else that then they'll use in perpetuity and continue to pay you for it, so that you sit back, which I know you do with your feet up on the with your feet up in a chair doing nothing all day. But you get my point. You know, then that check will arrive, or that electronic payment. The way checks don't arrive anymore, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But that's important, and I think that when you said that was exactly what I think about. That's how you get ahead, if you will, is by getting somebody else to go mow that lawn, and you get your little piece of it. You sell the lawn mowing and get somebody else to go mow the lawn, and then you just take your touch. And pretty soon you have 100 people out there mowing lawns, and you're not working at all, and you're just managing all, which is a full-time job, but you're getting paid not for your physical labor, but for your mental labor.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of value in that. Mm-hmm. Did we have a question?
I think we just wanted to talk about doing what you love and starting a business, that kind of stuff.
That's a good one. Go ahead.
Yeah, the doing what you love. Because so photography was kind of a hobby before it ever became a business. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Do you regret turning your hobby into a business? Do you regret going into photography as a business, and you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I think that's a really good question. I don't have any regrets.
Turning that free time activity into a full-time job? No?
No.
Even in the worst of times, what I found, Catherine, even in the worst of times, I can look back on that and go, man, I learned some good lessons there. And I can't say it without a smile.
Yeah.
Boy, fucking life taught me on that one.
Yeah.
Right?
I think because for me, the process of what I do is still really fun to me. So it's not like I'm doing something that I'm not a TV watcher. I just like doing what I do. I like spending my time creating.
Would you say...
I'm just dying to ask you, because you're a photographer, I'm learning, and you're obviously a really creative soul. Could you imagine not doing it?
So one of my reservations, I guess, with that is that I know that it's a pretty common pattern for me. I'll do something until I get almost professional level. I'd say fairly confident in it, to where I'm happy with whatever my skill set is within it, and then it turns boring. It gets boring, if that makes sense. And
Yes.
it almost becomes too easy at that point, and then
Yes.
I look for the next challenge. And so that would be one thing that I would fear if I would ever, let's say, go into wedding photography, is that by my 70th wedding, it's just mundane, repeat, same old, and I'd be bored and done with it and wish that, I mean, at that point, with my knowledge that I have now, I'd hire somebody else, have them do the shooting, and I'd just sit back. But
There you go. Right.
still being said, like normally it would
That
be.
sounded like something Jerry would say. I don't know.
The kid pays attention. What can we do?
Normally it would just, I would get bored, and then I'm just stuck in another job that I don't like. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad I asked you that.
See,
Yeah, that totally
that
makes
point,
sense.
though, I could see. I would add to that, though, Billy, that anything you do can become monotonous.
Mm-hmm.
It really can. And what has driven me for all of these? Look, I didn't grow up wanting to get into the transportation business.
Yeah.
Right. The transportation business kind of got a hold of me,
Mm-hmm.
and here I am. Would I have rather gone and done other things, and could I probably have done other things? Yes, but driving a car is what I understood.
Mm-hmm.
So I drove a car, and then I
Yeah.
thought I could make a living driving a car, and then I thought, well, I'll try the business of driving cars, and pretty soon here we are. But every day I want to be the best. I want to do the best job possible. I want to learn every lesson that I can learn. I want to see as many things as I can see, and I want to experience as much as I can. So every wedding for me would be a start over. Every day for me is a start over. I want to do everything possible today, no matter how bad yesterday was. And I compete against myself to remember, I assume coming into work every day, I'm going to be out of business at the end of the day. Decisions I'm going to make today are going to result in me either being in business or out of business. So I have to be on it every single day. So I would encourage people, and I think that a lot of people think the way that you do, particularly when you're stuck in a shitty job. I always say, do the best job possible at the shittiest job you have.
Yeah.
Right? Just because you have a shitty job doesn't mean you put in half the effort. Do a shitty job. And I'd go to work at McDonald's and flip hamburgers when I was 16, and I wanted to do it faster than everybody else did it. I wanted to turn that shit out quicker than it could. And here I am all of these years later. So I never thought this job sucked, as my feet, literally I had holes in the bottom of my shoes because they made you wear dress shoes, and I didn't have any money. So I had to wear this, and the grease eats through the bottom. I had to put a piece of cardboard in my shoes to go work at McDonald's.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. But again, I did it. I didn't complain. I didn't do it. I didn't say this job sucks. I was like, I'm going to fucking nail this job. And then a year in, Safeway offered me a quarter more. So I went to work for Safeway, and Cub Foods offered me a quarter more. So I went to work graveyard shift for Cub Foods. And from there, I worked at the carpet warehouse. My point being, I moved through all of these jobs, not because I didn't like the job. I never thought about it like that. I moved through these jobs because I was moving forward, but I was able to move forward because I fucking hammered every single job. Because I worked like my meal depended on it, which in the early days, my meal did depend on it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a way to fight that boredom by holding yourself accountable and just saying, regardless, someone's paying me to do something. Even if I don't think it's enough, I got to fucking hammer it.
Yeah, and I think it's creating a challenge as well.
Yes.
It's
I was
creating
going
a
to add
challenge
that.
for yourself
That's
mentally.
good.
Yes, absolutely.
And then that keeps the interest. It keeps the
Absolutely.
motivation going.
That is
Right.
so
Yeah.
right on.
I can't disagree with
Yeah.
that either.
And I have to, from knowing Jerry for 28 years, so anybody listening who hasn't known Jerry for 28 years, what he said is right on. I don't think I've ever heard him complain. I mean, you just always give it 1,000%. He's just, I mean, that's just real as it can be.
Right.
That is just solid right on.
I think that is
I've never heard you complain.
I think that is a huge benefit. I think I have a giant advantage over
agree.
my competitors. I think I have a
agree.
giant advantage over all of my employees and over everybody that I interact with is I don't know how to complain. I'll tell you a story. I have a developer buddy of mine, and in 2008 we were getting crushed. Right? The whole world caved in 2008. And if you were developing in that time or building houses, you were getting crushed. And so we got crushed. And you were doing twice the work for no money. Forget about twice the work for twice the money. We were doing twice the work for no money, where before we were doing half as much for a ton, right? But then the market caved. And so I remember we were downtown. The restaurant's not, the bar that we went down to have lunch in is not there anymore. They've developed it, but it's one of these old time Portland bars. His kids were little and my kids were little at the time. And he came and he's like, I can't do anymore. I mean, and we're on the precipice with some of these developments, right? And you have to just fucking push. And we were right on the edge. And he wasn't giving it his all. I could tell he wasn't giving his all. And I told him such. And to this day, he'll say, Jerry, a week doesn't go by, I don't think of this conversation exactly what you said to me. And what I said to him was, when I go home at night, I look at my kids sleeping in their beds. My kids were little. And I think, okay, I'm going to wake them up and tell them Daddy couldn't do it today. I held myself responsible. Literally, that was what did it. I would drive all the way to my house in Gresham. We worked downtown in 2004. My kids were little, just to look at my kids asleep. And then I'd get back in my car and drive back down to the office and work all night, because that was the inspiration that I needed, came from my kids to say, I'm going to wake them up and say, Daddy couldn't do it. So find that thing. You can always find something, some reason that you don't feel good, or some reason why you can't do it, or some reason why you can make an excuse. There's always excuses. Everybody has one. I dare everybody to be the person who doesn't make them. I dare everybody. Think how easy we say, like I've said before, I'm sick today, I can't come to work. How easy does that roll off the lips in today's society, right? How easy do those things happen? How easy do we say, I'm tired? It's been a long weekend. I'm a little tired. I don't suffer from any of that. And I think I really ingrained those lessons in my head. I learned them young. And then when I was a kid, or when I had kids and my business was going under and I had to just power through it, I really cemented those lessons home. And here we are all these years later, and I think that's one of the significant advantages that I have over my competitors.
I'll tell you, another advantage you have is your ability. Like, I started this whole thing by saying that I won't use the word vulnerability again, I promise.
It's all right.
That your amazing capacity to be introspective and self-aware is a huge, huge, huge advantage that you have.
Right.
The insight that you gain when you look inside is priceless. And like you said, why did it take me so long to not do that, to not look and see what it was that I wasn't doing correctly to make some money doing what I love?
And that's from somebody who is introspective. You are.
I am. I feel like
you're right. So
okay.
The lesson here that we're teaching, and what we want people to hear, is that even somebody who is, it's so easy to get stubborn. It's so easy to not see what's right in front of you because you blind yourself with what you believe to be reality.
Yeah.
And I never cared about what I believed. I cared about what was right in front of me.
Yeah.
And if that was the exact opposite of what I had just done or said, that was fine with me. I say all the time in business, change today what you changed yesterday. Do you know how hard that is to do?
Yeah.
Let me say that again. Change today what you changed yesterday. And so I will get and have over the years, Jerry, we just spent 2 weeks putting this whole thing together and finally launched it, and it's Tuesday and you want to change it. I said, yeah, did it work on Monday? No, it didn't. Well, okay, then change it. But we put 2 weeks in on it. And this emotion and this crazy kind of energy that they put into it, and it didn't work. They never see that it didn't work. They only see the amount of work that they put into it. And I never understood that. I never suffered from that. So I'm able to say that from my experience, and I'm happy and I'm humble that you say that to me, because if I were to name the two things that have put me where I am now, is my ability to look at myself objectively and to self-assess following that objective introspection.
Yeah. I could add to the list too. You have,
what would that be?
Common sense.
Yeah, if you could, if we could figure out how to bottle common sense, Catherine, we would be fat cats, wouldn't we?
Yeah, you possess that though.
Yeah,
yeah, you possess an innate common sense that's really grounding.
Boy, we got to have you on the podcast more often.
Hey,
you're fantastic.
No, thank you. I'm really honored. Yeah.
What do you got, Billy?
It was on what you were just talking about.
Nobody asked you.
Working hard and keeping a good attitude about it.
Yeah.
So this last weekend, you probably haven't heard, I did the 48-hour film festival.
Wow.
So there was a group that reached out online, and they said they were just looking for a behind the scenes photographer. And so I reached out to them, said that I'm a photographer. I'd like to be involved just so I can learn the filmmaking process. By talking with them and in the week or so leading up to this event, I slowly took on more and more roles within their group. So they were already a kind of a production company. It's two individuals that own their own company, and they do lots of music videos and stuff like that. And so one of them that's her full-time job. So she supports herself with her creative entrepreneur. And the other guy, I believe he's the same way, but he also goes to school. He goes to school full-time and has another job. Anyways, so I slowly kind of worked up and got more and more roles within this. These are things that I've done in the past, and this is equipment that I have. I'd love to take on as much responsibility as I could for this project. So we did this project, and they ended up giving me what I was asking for, because I just wanted it as a learning experience, and I went into it as a learning experience. It was unpaid and everything else, and I just wanted to soak up as much information as I could through this experience. And with that in mind, through the weekend, even though I wasn't a part of writing the film, I was there that entire time. They were coming up with concepts and sharing ideas and pitching in my little things here and there. So I was up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning until we got it done. And then I had passed out on their couch and woke up at 6 a.m. when the first person woke up, and went and got coffee with them and everything else. And that whole weekend, I had worked my ass off as hard as I could, completely unpaid, everything else. But just because I knew that's what this group needed, that's what I needed to contribute to make this to add value to it and add whatever sort of value that I could. So when Sunday rolls around and we're having computer issues like crazy, and the lead guy's starting to get frustrated and pissed off because we haven't slept in 30 hours and we're all jacked up on NOS and everything else. I thought that was what went through my head was, everybody's super pissed right now. He's about to punch his computer screen and just give up and say, fuck this. Now is the moment when I need to remain calm and just keep people moving. It doesn't matter necessarily how much I can do. We just need to keep this process moving. So our issue was that we had video footage. All of our video footage was shot in a 920 by 1080, right? Which is your normal YouTube video. And all the footage was like that. But the project file that he shared with me, which was about 8 hours of taking that 40 gigabytes of footage and putting it down into a 5-minute file. So that's 8 hours of work right there. When it was loaded up on my computer, which my computer could render that within 5 minutes, his computer would take 2 hours to render that. So that was our time saver to be able to get it turned in on time. When it came over to my computer, it stretched the footage. It changed it to a 1440 by 1080. So everything looked like it was, you take a person and you just stretch them out. And so that was our main issue. And there was nothing that we could have done or nothing that we tried that would correct that. So basically everybody was like, project's over. They're pissed off, they're tired, they're not thinking right and everything else. And so that's when I stepped in. Okay, you finished this. I found a semi workaround, ended up doing that semi workaround until it proved that it wasn't going to work, and just try to keep things moving. And eventually we did find a solution. And because we kept things moving during that portion, because he kept working on audio, because I still color graded the footage and did anything that we possibly could during that time, once we found the solution, we applied everything on top and got it finished. And so last night was the filming. They showed it downtown Hollywood Theater.
That's so cool.
And so it was like, I think 15 films all got shown.
And all of those are start to finish a collaborative process, all done from writing, acting, going through everything, costuming in 48 hours for the complete film.
And they had no idea what it was going to be
that is
at the beginning.
So amazing.
Friday night, you go and you pick a genre, and then they tell you a required character, a required line of dialogue, and a required item that has to be in the film. And then you go right.
You said you went into it to learn and immerse and pick up as much as you can, but it sounds like from what you talked about what you learned, really what you learned mostly about was yourself. I mean, you learned how you can calm everybody down, how you, because of that calmness and your ability to pull everything together, it got the project finished. So it wasn't even necessarily something that just technical that you came out learning. You learned about like a leadership quality you have in yourself and an
and
ability.
the point that I was trying to get at, and the importance of all of that beyond just the team help skills kind of a deal was that out of everybody that came and worked for this company essentially that they are, when last night after the film was over, after everybody had left, they talked to me and they're like, we're doing a project this coming up time. This next one might not be good, but we want you on any other project that we do. And we only do paid work.
Wow.
So they want me to help with anything that I'm open to help with because of that work ethic that I put in on that random
Fabulous.
one-off.
Good for you,
Fabulous.
man. That's the way.
Wow, Jerry can tell you how few people have.
I got
that
some
work
advice
ethic.
right along those lines when I was a kid that I have followed my entire life, which is be the rock that the water crashes against.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants to be that rock. I've used that my entire life. We'll have to do there. There you go. There's an Instagram post. Be the rock that everybody. Oh, did we? Damn it! You get 300 or 400 Instagram posts deep. You start to forget which one. But yeah, that's the key and that's what you're talking about. When the whole world's going to shit. Catherine knows this about me. When the whole world's going to shit, I'm unflappable. That's I don't get excited. I don't get low. I don't get high. You stay calm because there's no money in emotion. There's no money in getting excited. There's no money in letting how you feel impact what you do. You can't think clearly. And so in your case, where the whole world's coming apart, your job is to stay calm. My job when the whole world is coming apart is simple. Stay calm. And not only do I stay calm, everyone around you stays calm. I step out of it. It all turns into a madhouse, and then I step in the middle of it, and it's like, I don't know, like magnets, kind of pushing everybody out, and there's just this circle of calm. I don't do anything anymore. I don't even have to do anything other than just be present, and everybody else feels that calmness, and that is a skill that few people have because it's so easy to. It's very impressive when you watch a man react on his emotions, as they said in they said in the movie Seven, right? Very impressive to watch you get so excited, Brad Pitt, and act on your emotions. And there's no value there, none at all. You can't even when the world's caving in on you because you're not making any money and you're working your ass off. You still have to power through, and in order to do that, you have to set that emotional part of you aside. And I think we confuse emotion with energy. We confuse emotion with who we are and personality. And but I'm just an emotional person. Well, good luck then. Right? Knock yourself out. Use that emotion when you're doing your photos. Use that emotion when you're telling the bride how to stand, and use that emotion when you're painting your person and you're doing your thing and you're working right? Don't use that emotion where it works against you. That's where that's where the confusion comes from. Well, I'm just an emotional person. No, be emotional when I have you go out and sell and present and do that part of it. Don't be emotional when you come back and you have to do the little pieces in the nitty-gritty, because that's where it will most adversely affect you. So good for you. That's exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah, and then you did this thing to learn and to just throw yourself into, and now you're going to get paid work from it. I would assume that that's a combination of how technically good you were at problem solving and what good leadership skills you had that you found in the moment to solve the crisis.
Definitely.
Right? Yeah.
It was
That's awesome.
the mixture of networking, so getting people just to meet me in the first place, because there was too long that I was producing work but never meeting anybody, and so it never went anywhere.
Right on.
A mixture of that, the skills that I have gained by just doing either my trade for print type stuff, so just my whatever I could for free just to learn my work here, and just kind of that combined experience. And then, mixing that all into a project where I think it's key for me. It's key how I sell myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
Especially in these kind of projects and collaborations that I've been doing, I'm usually working with people who are a lot more experienced than I am. So I don't go into it at all trying to act like I know what the fuck I'm talking
Love
about.
that.
I sell myself short and overperform, and that leaves a much
Love
longer reminder to people. Somebody can look back and say, I expected this and got this, rather than I expected this and got less. I'd
rather work with somebody who knows nothing and will listen than somebody who knows everything and doesn't.
Yeah.
I'll take the dumb person who's willing to listen over the smart person who won't.
Yeah.
Every time.
And it's staying quiet when you know that you're not needed and adding in when you know it is.
Shut up and learn.
Yeah. During their whole writing process, I sat there quiet. And then it wasn't until there was only certain moments where I was like, this would be cool. And I would just throw out that idea. And a lot of those ideas made it into the film.
Yeah.
Funny story, actually, the opening scene to our film was a shot that I took just fucking around as my own shot.
I love
It was
it.
my own personal footage that I wanted, and they saw it while editing, and they're like, that's opening scene.
I think that's where I fell asleep watching that.
This motherfucker.
Catherine,
Yeah.
it's been how long?
It's been an hour and 4 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
Listen, you see how I
Wow.
say we have to do more of these
I
because
would love
the
it.
hour goes by
So
like
quick.
For a business podcast, you had on a guest that says, I just know nothing about business and been losing money for years.
Perfect.
But
that's why we wanted
I
you here
really
because
loved-
I
I
think
loved it.
your stories are an example and are indicative of the mistakes and the learning that the average person has to go through getting into business. And if we can do anything from this podcast is give some people some guidance to at least stop and maybe ask a question,
love it.
to stop and maybe read something.
Love it.
So unfortunately though, our time is up. I can't believe it.
Can't
I was so
believe it.
looking forward to
Thank
this. So
you.
you have to come back.
I would love
You
that. I'm
promise
really
you'll come
honored,
back, right?
honored that you invited me and really honored that you invited me back.
All right. And you'll
Thank
come
you.
back.
Absolutely.
You'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Glad to hear it.
That'd
That
be
wraps
awesome.
up this episode. I got my little thing. See, Catherine, I get to. Where's my piece of paper,
That's
asshole?
right over there. I cleaned the table.
God, again, I got to reach over here to get it.
Every time I clean the table,
Oh,
this
please,
guy
everyone,
freaks
I'm
out.
coming back. To get my write up. Perfect. Now I can't see it. I don't have my glasses. I got it memorized. I think this wraps everybody. Seriously, this wraps up this episode, and I'm sorry to see it end. That hour went too fast. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, Google, and fuck Reddit. And Spotify. We got to replace Reddit with Spotify.
Dude, you're gonna get in trouble. You keep saying fuck Reddit every podcast. We're just gonna get blown the fuck up on Reddit.
I'm pissed at Reddit.
Reddit is like the birthing place of the internet.
I know. God damn it. I got to find a different subreddit to go into. The
Yeah.
one I'm in pisses me off.
You're in
Fuck my
slash
subreddit.
business.
How's that?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You're in slash business, like the overall most general business category that you can be in.
All
we
right.
just need to
We
find
gotta
you a
tighten
better
that
group.
up. Yeah, we got to
Okay,
tighten that
sweet.
up.
Sweet.
You can find me at all of this at Jerry Brazie, Brazie on all of them. Send us your questions to questions@JerryBrazie or check us out on jerrybrazie.com. Remember, everybody, opportunities are everywhere. Catherine will tell you this is absolutely true, but you got to go get them.
Yay.
Peace.
Peace. Peace out.